What if the person you passed by this morning, the one standing alone by the curb, had once taken a bullet so others wouldn't have to? Would you have looked a little longer, maybe nodded, even if you didn't know his name? It was Veterans Day, and the town square buzzed with the rhythm of drums, flags snapping high, and rows of school children waving miniature stars and stripes. Mothers lined the sidewalk with toddlers on their shoulders, and the mayor rehearsed a few words off a crumpled note card. The air was festive, proud, familiar. But near the very end of the block, just past the sandwich shop that hadn't opened yet, a man stood alone. No uniformed escorts. No medals gleaming on his chest. Just a threadbare green coat, sleeves worn thin at the elbows, and a weathered cap pulled low. He didn't hold a sign. Didn't wave. He stood like someone waiting for a name to be called that hadn't been spoken in years. People passed him without meaning to. Their eyes danced past him like wind past a flag that had long stopped fluttering. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointed at the man, but she was busy adjusting her phone for a picture. No one saw how still he stood, not stiff, not proud, just still. And if you looked closely, his hand trembled, not from age, but from something older than time, the weight of being forgotten. He didn't expect applause. He didn't even expect a seat. He just came, to remember. And to be remembered. Even if no one looked his way. His name was Walter Griggs. 82 years old, though the way he moved, you'd think he was older. Not because of his body, but because of the weight he carried. Walter didn't march in the parade. He hadn't been invited. He just walked along the sidewalk beside it, one quiet step for every year the world had moved on without asking how he was doing. He had shown up early, not to be seen, but to bear witness. His shoes, polished the night before, were too loose. He had lost weight recently. The coat he wore, faded army green, had patches stitched by hand. Some were from wear. Others were from memory. A city volunteer approached him near the corner. She was young, clipboard in hand, polite but distracted. "Sir, this section's for participants. Do you mind waiting back there?" Walter blinked slowly. He nodded once. No protest. No question. She didn't know who he was. He didn't offer to explain. He stepped aside, toward the shadows of a half-closed cafe, and folded his hands in front of him. Watching. Just watching. No one clapped for him when the brass band passed. No eyes lingered. No camera lens found him. He wasn't bitter. That wasn't his way. But in that moment, beneath the rustling flags and distant cheers, Walter felt something deeper than loneliness. He felt invisible. Not forgotten by time. Forgotten by people. And somehow, that hurt more. Walter didn't leave. When the last color guard passed by and the crowd's energy began to shift, when people started checking their watches and folding their flags, he took a step forward. Just one. Then another. Not toward a stage. Not toward a podium. But along the side of the road, behind the procession. No one asked him to walk. No one told him he could. But his legs moved on instinct, steady and slow. Not stiff like someone seeking attention, and not proud like someone expecting praise. Just walking. His steps made no sound on the pavement. The noise of the parade still hung in the air, drums fading into the distance, children chasing candy tossed from the last float. But Walter wasn't chasing anything. He moved like someone who had marched once before, when it mattered. When marching meant you carried not just a flag, but the names of men who didn't come home. He passed a young father crouched on the curb, tying his son's shoe. The father looked up, gave a polite nod. Walter returned it without breaking stride. The boy asked, "Is he in the parade?" The father hesitated. Then said, "I'm not sure." Walter heard that. And for a moment, he almost stopped. But he didn't. His right hand hovered near his coat pocket, just enough to feel the corner of something folded inside. A small, worn paper. He didn't take it out. Not yet. Further down, he walked past a woman offering bottled water to some of the uniformed veterans. She had extras. But she didn't offer one to him. She didn't see him. He kept walking. And the farther he went, the more he blended into the edges of the scene, like a shadow trailing behind the celebration. To some, he might have looked like someone who got lost in the crowd. But to Walter, this was the only place he still belonged. He didn't need a banner. He didn't need a seat. He just needed the silence to mean something. Because sometimes, the quietest steps are the ones taken for others. And he had taken more than his share. Walter had nearly reached the end of the street when the noise behind him softened into nothing. The parade had moved on, turning the corner toward City Hall. Laughter faded. The band was gone. Confetti still floated through the air like dust in an empty room. He kept walking, slower now, not because he was tired, though he was, but because something about the silence felt heavier than before. Like even the street had stopped to notice him, but still didn't know what to say. Then he heard footsteps. Light ones. Not hurried. Not loud. Just small. He didn't turn. He assumed it was another volunteer, or maybe someone crossing the street. But then, he felt it. A tiny hand, warm and firm, wrapped around his own. He looked down. A little girl. No older than 7. Brown curls under a red knit hat. Holding his hand like she'd known him all her life. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Walter froze for a second. Not out of shock, but because the moment was too full to move through quickly. He looked around, as if to find a parent calling her back, but no one stepped forward. He looked at her again. Her eyes were steady. Curious, not afraid. "You walkin' alone?" she asked, finally. Walter's throat tightened. He cleared it quietly. "I suppose I am," he said. The girl frowned, like that wasn't the right answer. "Not anymore," she said. And just like that, she took a step, and gently tugged him forward. People along the sidewalks began to notice. Not everyone. Just a few at first. A young woman near the bakery lowered her phone. A teenage boy stopped slouching and straightened up. An older veteran in a folding chair saluted with trembling fingers. Walter didn't know what to do with the attention. He hadn't expected it. He hadn't wanted it. But with her hand in his, he didn't feel out of place anymore. He felt seen. The little girl walked at his pace. She didn't rush him. She didn't let go. Up ahead, a man in a blue sport coat, someone with a lanyard around his neck, motioned toward a small gap between parade floats. "You can join them," he called. "We've got room." Walter looked down at the girl. She looked up and nodded. They stepped into the street. Quietly. Side by side. There were no trumpets. No announcement. Just a moment held together by the rhythm of 2 sets of feet, one large and worn, the other small and certain. Walter's hand didn't tremble anymore. He didn't smile. But his eyes softened. Somewhere in the crowd, someone began to clap. Not loudly. Just one person at first. Then another. Then a few more. And for the first time in a very long time, Walter Griggs walked not behind, not beside, but within the memory of something whole. Because one small hand had done what the parade could not. It had reminded a forgotten man that he still mattered. Walter walked slowly, still holding the little girl's hand, as the crowd began to shift. The chatter softened. The clapping didn't swell like a stadium cheer, it lingered gently, like morning light through kitchen curtains. Soft. Personal. A few people stepped off the curb, not to interrupt, but to watch more closely. A mother lowered her phone and placed her hand over her heart. A boy, no older than 10, pulled off his baseball cap and held it to his chest. A group of high school band members standing off to the side turned and began to applaud, not because someone told them to, but because they suddenly understood something they hadn't before. Walter didn't lift his hand. He didn't wave. He just kept walking. One foot in front of the other. Letting the moment be enough. At one point, a woman from the city council approached quietly. She was holding a program and a clipboard, still wearing her staff badge. "I'm sorry we didn't recognize you earlier," she said, careful not to speak too loudly. Walter looked at her, not with resentment, but with something more fragile, understanding. "You didn't see me," he said gently. "That's different than forgetting." She didn't know how to respond, so she nodded and stepped back. Behind them, people had begun whispering, not in a gossipy way, but with that hush you hear at memorials or old churches. The kind where reverence doesn't need volume. The little girl let go of Walter's hand for a second to adjust her mittens. But when she finished, she reached right back for him. He didn't flinch. A man with a professional camera slung over his shoulders stepped forward. He seemed like he wanted to ask for a picture, but something in Walter's face stopped him. He just stood, lowered the lens, and watched instead. Further ahead, a small group of veterans from the local American Legion turned to face Walter. One of them, an older black man in a crisp blazer with a patch sewn onto the sleeve, saluted him. Walter returned it. Slowly. Steady. And for that brief exchange, neither of them was alone. A boy in the crowd asked his father, "Why are people clapping for that man?" The father crouched beside him and said, "Because we almost didn't." Walter heard it. His pace didn't change. But something in the set of his shoulders did. The air had shifted, not just around him, but within the people who watched. They weren't looking at a man in an old coat anymore. They were seeing what it meant to carry history in silence. They were seeing what it meant to show up, even when the world no longer notices. And they were learning, perhaps for the first time, that honor doesn't always ride in the front row. Sometimes, it walks quietly behind. And sometimes, it needs the smallest voice to point it out. When the last group of marchers turned onto the next block and the parade truly ended, Walter stood still beside the little girl. The crowd had begun to thin. People were packing up strollers, folding chairs, tucking flags into coat pockets. The clapping had faded into murmurs. A reporter approached, mid-30s, press badge swinging on a lanyard. She held a microphone but didn't lift it yet. "Sir, would you mind if I asked your name?" she asked gently. Walter didn't answer right away. He looked past her, to where the last confetti was blowing into the gutter. Then he nodded once. "Walter Griggs," he said. She smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Griggs. And were you in the service?" Walter looked at her. Not annoyed, not proud, just steady. "Yes," he said. "A long time ago." The reporter paused, expecting more. Maybe a story. A rank. A year. But Walter didn't offer it. He didn't mention where he served. Didn't say what he lost. Didn't name medals, battles, or brothers buried overseas. He didn't need to. The weight of his silence said enough. The little girl tugged his sleeve and whispered, "You don't like talking about it, huh?" Walter crouched slowly so they were eye to eye. His knees creaked. "There's a lot I could say," he said softly. "But some things, they stay quieter than words." She nodded like she understood, even if she didn't. Kids don't need all the details. They feel truth in tone. The reporter lowered her mic. "Thank you for walking with us," she said. Walter didn't say, "You're welcome." He didn't nod again. He just gave her a look, not cold, not tired, just a look that said, "I showed up." That's enough. As the wind picked up, he reached into his coat pocket and gently unfolded the small paper tucked inside. He looked at it for a second. Just enough to remember. Then folded it back up, slower than before, and tucked it away again. Some names don't need to be read aloud to be remembered. Some stories don't need to be told to be honored. Walter had said what mattered, by choosing to say almost nothing at all. 3 days after the parade, Walter Griggs received a letter. It wasn't official in appearance. No government seal, no bolded heading. Just a plain envelope, handwritten, with his name spelled carefully across the front. Inside, a folded card. Simple words. "We saw you walk. We should have seen you sooner. Please join us." Signed by the mayor, beneath a short note from the local Veterans Committee. They were hosting a small luncheon that Saturday. Not a ceremony. Just a gathering of those who had served. Coffee. Sandwiches. A quiet room. Walter stared at the card for a while, unsure what to make of it. Not suspicious, but uncertain if his presence would really belong. But that Saturday, he went. Not in uniform. Just a clean shirt and the same old coat. He arrived early, as always. Sat near the end of the long table. No one asked for stories. No one put a microphone in front of him. Instead, someone slid a chair beside him and asked, "Coffee?" He nodded. An older woman from the Navy Reserve sat across from him and said, "You were the one walking with the little girl, weren't you?" Walter hesitated. Then nodded again. "She's my niece," the woman said. "She told me you didn't say much. I told her that's how we know it mattered." For the first time in a while, Walter allowed a small smile. As others arrived, they didn't crowd him. They didn't try to make up for lost time with loud praise. They just made space. And for the first time in years, Walter didn't feel like he had to stand on the sidelines of something meant for men like him. He had a seat. He didn't have to earn it. He just had to show up. And this time, someone saved him a chair. The next week, Walter Griggs returned to the same sidewalk where the parade had passed him by. Not because he expected something, but because it felt like the right place to be. He sat on a bench this time, near the post office. The little girl wasn't there, but he carried her in thought. In his pocket, the same folded paper. He never showed it to anyone. Never needed to. People walked past him, some with bags of groceries, some on phones, some rushing like always. But now and then, someone would glance his way and pause. A nod. A smile. A brief, respectful look that said more than words ever could. One man in a postal jacket stopped and said, "You were at the parade, weren't you?" Walter nodded. "I saw you walk," the man said. "With the girl. It made me think about my dad." Walter didn't ask questions. He just looked at him with quiet understanding. "I should have called him," the man added, voice cracking. Still can, I guess. Walter placed a steady hand on the man's arm. No speech. Just presence. That's what he had learned. Some things don't need to be explained. They just need to be carried. Like memory. Like respect. Like a small hand in yours when the world forgets to look. And maybe that's what we're meant to do, for one another. Not with speeches or ceremonies. But with time. With space. With a chair that's already pulled out. With one simple act that says, I see you. You matter. And I'm still holding on. Walter didn't need the little girl to come back. She already had. In every hand that reached out afterward. Somewhere down the block, a new family was hanging a flag from their porch. A boy, maybe 7, asked his mom, "Do veterans still live around here?" She looked over her shoulder. "They sure do," she said. "You just have to look. And maybe, hold on when you find one." In the quiet steps of Walter Griggs, we witnessed more than a forgotten veteran finding his place. We saw a community rediscover what it means to truly see someone. This story reminds us that dignity isn't earned through applause, medals, or parades. It lives in the silent spaces, a small hand reaching out, a seat offered without asking, a nod that says you still matter. Walter didn't ask for recognition. He showed up, not to be celebrated, but to remember. And in doing so, he reminded us that honoring service isn't just about a day in the calendar. It's about noticing those who walk among us every day, quietly carrying histories we may never hear. So here's a question we leave you with. Who are you walking past each day, without truly seeing? If this story moved something in you, please like, share, and subscribe to Legacy of Courage Stories. Help us hold space for the quiet heroes still among us, and ensure their courage is never invisible again.